So my whole difficulty with this is assigned staff. So where are those staff going to come from? It kind of is a little bit similar to what Deputy Sherlock was talking about earlier. So if you have maybe staff that are existing, and no disrespect to them, but in another role within the civil service, and they're moved over to this, really, if we wanted to be fully 100% independent, the chief deciding officer, you know, he or she should be able to, you know, advertise for staff and decide on what type of staff that is needed for that role. And it should be with that office solely. It shouldn't be assigned staff from the department, because that's sort of the department's way of being in and being out at the same time. And we all know, Deputy Connolly made several references to Carranua, and every time she said it, I was like, I can't believe I forgot to speak about them, because the people's experience with that institution was just horrific. I mean, the stories that you could tell about people's interaction, and this is kind of the fear that something like this it's going to be similar. So I think it's better for everybody. I think it's better for you, Minister, it's better for the department if it is totally independent and you've got no role whatsoever. The department has no role whatsoever in assigning staff. It should be the chief deciding officer, and that's going to end up being a very frustrating role as well if you're asked to do something and then you're like sort of being, your hands are tied. So I really believe that we need to have that as being totally independent. Thanks, Ceann Comhairle.
Ceann Comhairle. What is being proposed here is not similar to Carranua. The structures, the legal structures are different, and I think that's really important we put that at the record at the start. The decision making, which is the central role, the decisions on each of these applications as they come in, which is the role for the chief deciding officer, is protected in legislation. The independence of that is protected in legislation. Decisions of the chief deciding officer can be appealed to an independent appeals panel, and those decisions can go to the High Court on a point of law. So I believe the protections that you speak about, Deputy Connolly, are built into the decision-making processes. In terms then of the issue of staff appointments, which I think is essential in terms of the actual amendment before us, what you described, Deputy Funchion, in terms of the ability that all staff would be appointed independently, that is almost an entire state agency. That's a state agency model. And, you know, I've spoken about this, and we spoke about it in the Information and Tracing Bill, the amount of time that will take to establish. Now, maybe you think that that should be done, but we've also spoken, and we've all spoken, about the need to act quickly to make sure survivors and former residents can actually avail of their redress. We know the amount of time it takes to create a new agency in this state. Even the work Minister McEntee and Minister Harris are doing in terms of domestic violence agency, they're looking at an 18-month period. So I believe a process whereby we have an independent office in a department, where it can use the strengths of the department in terms of a HR, the ability to get people into relevant places in the right amount of time, but importantly, have a legislative protection of the independence of the decision-making function, is the best way to go.
Yes, you can, yes. Final contribution.
I just want to come back in to say that what the amendment says is that the chief deciding officer should be able to appoint his or her staff independently. The idea of that is the chances of you having to appeal a decision, if you have a genuinely independent staff, it's going to be less. I'm not talking about setting up a whole new state agency, which is different than what we were proposing in the birth and information legislation. I'm talking about if I was appointed, let's say, in the morning as an independent person, and I say I need 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 staff that you go and appoint, there's no way that would take 18 months. I mean, I can't understand how that could be used as an argument. And the thing is, there might be all of the appeals, which I 100%, you know, appeals are really important and they should be independent, and I welcome that part of it. However, you will have less likelihood of appeals if you have a really decent, genuine, independent service that's going by what is right or what's, you know, the regulations and stuff. That's not necessarily somewhat kind of tainted, for want of better words, in their view. And I just honestly can't understand how, what the issue is with this. If the person is supposed to be independent, let them appoint their own staff. So that's one of the key things of being independent. I can't understand it. And part of me is annoyed with myself for being annoyed because this whole legislation is so flawed. It's like Deputy Connolly said earlier, something about, I forget what word she said, but basically you're trying to change something that's already so flawed. But on these minor things, I really do think, Minister, you can concede some of these points. I honestly don't see how there's any difficulty with somebody who is supposed to be independent appointing their own staff. Thank you, Concora.